Hello and welcome to another the second discussion on VR. I am Jared. I am a concierge at REM5. Joined by Meg, Guare, and James. We're all also concierges at REM5 and all very intelligent people, know a lot about VR.
Aw, you.
And yeah, so today we are just going to be talking about headsets and specifically the Vive Pro, the Oculus Quest, and the Valve Index. We'll probably touch on other headsets as well.
Yeah.
But
not the Vive Cosmos, because nobody talks about that.
That's out of the discussion.
Yeah, we do not.
Nobody needs to even know it exists.
Keep that nightmare out.
Forget that I ever said the word Cosmos. Don't even Google it.
Googling now.
No, James.
Oh, no.
The dark path.
I'll put it on the background.
I'll be discussing the Virtual Boy today. So.
Oh my god. Okay, but maybe we should, because, like, you know, there's a lot of nostalgia about the Virtual Boy, you know, the original Nintendo VR headset, but, like, those red lasers will actually kill your eyesight. So, like,
all right.
Just, like, no joke, it's medically a bad idea to use a Virtual Boy.
Dude, the 1995 OG Virtual Boy Classic. It's a blast if you're prepared to be incredibly disoriented and physically ill.
Have your neck hurt for about 2 weeks? Like,
oh god, yeah, because they had the stand and you had to like shove your face into it because they couldn't hook it up to you.
Right.
Dude,
Before 3 Degrees of Freedom existed.
yes, nice segue.
That's right. You couldn't even move your head around, which you can if you have 3 degrees of freedom.
True.
Yeah, so obviously you have already read the kind of notes for this this discussion. But yeah, so we're going to just start with a very brief overview of different kinds of VR headsets. So Meg, do you want to talk about what the difference between 3 degrees and 6 degrees of freedom is?
Yeah, so the Oculus Go, for example, standalone headset, it's got 3 degrees of freedom. So basically you can move your head right and left, and you can also tilt your head, but you can't like physically walk around in the space, because if you do end up getting pretty disoriented. And then moving on to 6 degrees of freedom, you still have that, you know, right, left, tilt, but you also have the ability to walk around in your environment. So you get the bonus 3 degrees of freedom, which are
up, down, left, right, forward, back. I can't really like walk around to really gesture as well in this space as I can in actual physical reality. Right. The crouching up and down always seems to be the one that gets people. They like don't think about that third plane.
Yeah, like x-axis is just like.
But like we live in 3 dimensions, so it's basically always either 3 or 6 degrees of freedom. I suppose you could hypothetically make like a 4 degrees of freedom headset where it can only tell if you're moving forward and back, but I feel like that would be like really unuseful.
I feel like you need that little extra.
Maybe just a crouching up-down headset. It's got like some kind of weird gravity sensor in it. But yeah, no, that is not a thing. It's 3 and 6, 9.
Yeah, and so kind of with that overview, which honestly, like, I feel like I'd been working here for a little while before I actually like came across this. I feel like getting knowledge on VR is just like it's a very like progressive knowledge, you know? It's like you kind of just learn as you go.
Yeah, and it's also like constantly changing because every word we use to describe what headsets can and can't do, like I don't even use the word virtual reality to refer to like just watching a video in a 3 degrees of freedom headset. But I mean, that doesn't stop Oculus from advertising the Go as being a virtual reality headset. And it doesn't stop anybody from using the words mixed and augmented and super reality to talk about their headsets, which just makes it more confusing.
Yeah, and so yeah, just kind of like not to get away from the language because that is a rabbit hole and that's a 6-hour discussion. But yeah, so just kind of the headsets we're talking today, just because it's nice to kind of have a reference of what the movement is like, and all the headsets we'll be talking today are all have 6 degrees of freedom, so fully immersive, fully spatial headsets, fully spatial experiences.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so like I said, we're kind of going to be focusing on three main headsets, kind of the major players in the field right now. And the first one that's kind of on the list is the Vive Pro, which I personally have spent the most time in out of all the headsets. I feel like that's probably applicable to all of us.
Except maybe James.
Maybe James, yeah.
It's about the same as my Oculus stuff at this point.
Right,
Yeah.
but yeah, standard headset that we have at the lab. So it's the one that we use for, our reservations, what we do in our free time.
And yeah, and the nice thing about it is like, for all that it has its like little clunky aspects, the Vive Pro is still probably for me the most comfortable and consistently high quality experience. Like it's not perfect, there's little things I change about the way the Velcro straps go or like the way it tightens in, but once you get it on, it's comfy, it doesn't weigh you down too much, and it still has one of the best resolutions per eye of any headset out there. So like if I'm just gonna jump into something, I'd rather do it in a Vive Pro because I know it's gonna be easy to use and like do everything it needs to do. But
I feel like it's the best multi-use headset in terms of VR quality, as anything you can do in the Vive, you can pretty much do in everything you can do in other headsets, you can do in the Vive pretty steadily.
Right.
Whereas the other headsets have more of an aspect to certain things.
Right. Depending on what you want, you might prefer another headset. But if you're in a Vive Pro, you're just going to do everything, and it's going to be fine. It's going to be good. It's going to be a good experience. And by the way, for anyone who's watching it, that's the one in the bottom left of James's screen that says Vive and has all the weird knobbies on it. The cool thing about the Pro is that unlike the Quest and some other headsets we could talk about, uses infrared tracking. So you actually have boxes set up that are shooting out little laser beams of infrared light, but then the headset is using those dimples to sense. The cool thing about that is that it's pretty accurate and pretty fast and pretty consistent. The downside is, you have to set up little black boxes and get the angles perfect and futz around with them and set the channels and all this other stuff. So it's definitely one of the clunkier ones to set up. But once you get it going, I mean, you almost rarely have to worry about tracking issues compared to other headsets.
It's a very consistent, very reliable headset, and just for like the purposes that we use it for, just like because most of the people that we work with, like they've never done VR before, so it's a very easy headset to get into to help other people into, just because it just has a really pretty solid build, and it's one that you can wear for hours at a time.
Long time.
It'll be, and you'll be just fine.
Okay. And it is a headset that we at the lab primarily use it tethered to our desktops and laptops, but it also does have the option to go wireless too. So
yeah, the wireless is something that I honestly only recommend to somebody who's like playing alone and has a really stable setup, because every time we tried to run that thing, it was such a cluster bleep. I mean, the battery pack would get disconnected from the wireless horns would get disconnected from the headset. Like the cords would get all finagled, the computer would stop running the wireless tracking. Like you get one person in it and you can have them play for an hour, and once it's working perfectly. But the moment you're trying to switch headsets around and like play with a bunch of different people and stuff, it just gets really messy.
It does. We did have an okay setup though, with the fanny pack mode, battery pack and the fanny. Like it's great for like single uses.
Exactly.
But once you're swapping everybody out, it's a little fussy.
And it's the closest we ever got to having REM5 branded fanny packs. So close.
Next year.
Yeah.
Next year.
As far as the Vive goes, I am a fan of the controllers too. Just with primarily you're using the trigger, but it also has trackpad for like touchscreen options. The elusive, always sneaky pause system button is a little
Yeah, I would say like speaking as like a gamer sort of person, I prefer controllers that have more actual buttons and like joysticks on them, because that feels natural and it feels a little more precise. On the other hand, the Vive is the one that feels the most like a TV remote, and it's the most intuitive to just grab and hold without having to like figure out what the ergonomics are, It's a stick. You grab the stick and you push the buttons on the stick, and it's like easy to like grok right away. Which is really nice.
It's an accessible headset, accessible controllers. And
right.
And yeah,
Mhm.
oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, if we're thinking of segueing soon, if we're talking about accessibility though, the Quest does have it beat on at least a couple spots.
For sure.
Yeah, very much so. So yeah, I guess so the Oculus Quest came out last year, I believe.
Yeah, they actually just
It
celebrated
just
their
hit
1
its
year.
year. Yeah.
Oh, you saw that ad in the menu too, Meg.
Oh yeah.
They're very proud that they're still around after a year. Although I'd be too.
Yeah.
May 21st, 2019, exactly a year.
Yeah.
Happy.
And to be fair, like if I were them, I'd be pretty happy with the current situation because the Quest felt like it kind of had a rocky launch. Like they dropped it on the market and not everybody was talking about it right away. It took a couple months for Steam to really get rolling on the Quest train.
Yeah, once the traction got going though, it's like literally sold out for.
Well,
still sold out until
yes.
August.
Didn't they released it around the same time that they did with their new headset, the Rift S though? That was another thing. So
and the headsets are really similar. They use the same inside-out tracking. They run basically all the same experiences, except the Rift S was supposed to be the like Vive Pro style computer tethered version that could run all the cooler higher-end experiences. The problem is now with the Rift Link system, you can just connect with a USB-C cable and run Rift games on the Oculus Quest. So I honestly cannot fathom why someone would buy a Rift S in 2020. Like, it was a very awkward middle child.
It's a more annoying setup and it's less versatile. So if you're getting Oculus, you might as well just use the Quest so that you can have it wireless or wired, depending on what you want to use it for. And from what I heard, the quality is roughly around the same for when you link it with the Quest or use the Rift S.
Yeah.
And so actually also for anyone who is not familiar with the Quest, it is a untethered headset. Very, very portable. It's the one above James's head. And I would say that it is helping bring VR more into the mainstream just because of the accessibility and just like people are more likely to, take that out, they bring that to a party and show it to people, which obviously is not right now, but yeah, so it's a very portable, accessible headset. And so actually, just if we're kind of talking about the tech of it, so like Blair mentioned, it's like an inside-out tracking. So there are those cameras. You can kind of see them on the bottom of their.
Things point to a camera.
What?
Right above your left ear.
There you go.
Yeah. So those cameras are literally just looking out at your environment, and then you like define your play area, and then you can play anywhere that you have room and that you have enough light to do so.
And no chairs to crash into.
No chairs to crash into.
Although honestly, the feature that I use more often these days is the standing room setup. So you can do this whole thing where like the Oculus figures out where the ground is and you like draw a line on the ground so you can set up a play space and everything. Or you can just click a button that says I'm standing in a column, and that's fine for like a bunch of experiences. Like if I'm playing Beat Saber or I'm just like watching a movie or something, I'll just go to the stationary one and it'll just like make a cool column line around me, and then I don't have to worry about drawing.
When you're playing Beat Saber in that setting, do you notice like grids pop up around you at all? Or do you just not move that much?
So I just try not to move and I try to step back a little bit. Actually, if I'm playing Beat Saber in 360, I appreciate the standing room only more, because if I start to shift around while I'm spinning, it's actually really nice to have the warning grid there because it keeps me centered. Which major feature of the Quest, as long as we're talking about the Quest, you can play Beat Saber tracks in 360 degrees and actually spin around as you're slashing blocks. There's not a ton of tracks out, but it is a lot of fun. And it gets your heart rate up faster because you're twirling.
Right. Feels good. Feels good in 360 Beat Saber. But I find myself using, the setting where I'm, instead of a stationary boundary, I draw my own boundaries because I feel like I move too much. And I like have that boundary pop up all the time.
That's fair. You do take really wide steps when you dodge stuff. I've seen that. You like do power lunges to the left and right.
True.
Yeah, so actually, Meg and James, since you both actually have Quests, how would you, because like honestly, I feel like especially if you live in an apartment, you don't really have much room. Like how would like the Quest compare to if you had a tethered, if you had a Vive Pro in your space? just with like functionality and just like actually getting it set up in your space.
My personal biggest issue with the Quest is just how poorly balanced the headset itself is, because all of your weight is just sitting right in the front.
Sure.
So like after like, 10, 15 minutes of wearing it, my skull is just like a little crushed.
Yeah.
The wearability of the Quest just like isn't there for me, whereas like I could spend hours in the Vive and it's so well balanced. There's like multiple, options for adjusting it, where
Yeah,
just
the
more
Quest
comfortable
just has the
overall.
whole, hey, if it's sliding down your face, crush it to your face tighter. And it doesn't even like, it feels like the adjustments are hard to do. It needs like a counterweight in the back, or like, as annoying as the Vive's like hard plastic orbital is, like that provides stability. And I think the Quest is really missing that.
Right, and I think they do have like a counterweight, or I've seen a couple counterweight like options for it, which I'd be interested to try. But since I have such easy access to the Vive Pro, I don't.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to invest in like upgrades to one headset when you can just use the one you like better.
Right.
Especially since the Vive is still overall better. Like the weight adjustment helps, but overall you're still gonna prefer the Vive.
Yeah, and like the resolution of the Vive's lenses is like half again the Quest's, and there's a bunch of like graphical simplicity they had to introduce into the Quest. Like if you play Beat Saber, you don't have all those cool lightning lines or the extra light effects. It's literally just like bars of red and blue, and you're slashing through blocks of red and blue, which works. It's still fun. But like playing so much in the Vive and then switching to the Quest, I'm looking around at like, oh god, is this like the retro version or something?
Well, also going
8-bit?
Going back to Jared's original question, owning the Quest, I'd say the one benefit over it from the Vive Pro is you don't have to have like a consistent room to have it like set up. So like, for the Vive or like other sorts of headsets, a lot of the times you need sensor boxes or lighthouses, stuff like that set up in a space. With the Quest, you can kind of just use it in an open spot that's available for the moment without having to constantly have that spot open. So like, I know before, like in my old Rift, you have to have like, same with the Vive, you would have to have a dedicated space, constantly have those sensors or lighthouses set up. For me, with the Quest, I play in like multiple spots, whatever is most like accessible at the moment. So say I'm using a room at that time, that's free at that day. Another day, you might have people over using that room and then everyone's talking. So you can't set it up there. You can bring it to another room, set it up there for people to use. So it just makes things easier that I don't have to have like a space blocked off constantly because I have this VR headset set up, which I'm not always using.
You mean you don't want to buy like 5 extra lighthouses and just set them up in different rooms? So that you can
let me just have
spaces?
let me just have these like black boxes hanging from the ceiling at all times, making
In
it seem
every
like,
room.
Yeah, people are just gonna think their camera's watching them at all times.
Hey, I've got little stickers that say "This is not a camera." If you want to put it on all of them, that'll reassure people, right?
Yeah, that'll be reassuring. I feel like for me that makes it feel like it's actually more of a camera. It's like,
oh no, it's really good. I've put a bunch of them on things that are in fact not cameras, and it's great.
like
But
your laptop.
that is a totally different thing. We're not going to talk about right now.
I've also seen some really great videos of people playing quests. Like there's this person who did like a Beat Saber compilation, and they're like playing it just out in the middle of fields, like sitting on like bridges that like train tracks are going over. So it's like, so it also like kind of lends itself to just like very just.
Yeah, the fact that it goes anywhere is a huge part of it. Although speaking of videos, I remember, I don't know if you guys watched it, but the video of the woman playing Pistol Whip on the Quest on roller skates. So it looked like she was actually roller skating. That was some mad balance skills.
Yeah, that was
like,
cool.
damn. I wish I was that good at Pistol Whip. Pistol Whip's a good point about the Quest. We talked a lot about how the graphics are super simplistic, but as I've heard people point out before, in a game like Pistol Whip, where it's got this really simplified aesthetic anyway, there's kind of something to be said for taking off some of those fancy After Effects. And I've also found that VR experiences that try less to be realistic tend to be less disorienting because your brain doesn't try to think of it as reality. But it's still immersive and it's still cool and it's still fun, but you're not worrying as much about like, oh wait, that object's like moving differently than how it should because it's like a goofy cartoon block. And I think with Pistol Whip in particular, that super stylized, like everyone's a weird red glass shadow aesthetic works really well, even if you tone down the graphics a bit.
Yeah, I actually find myself playing Pistol Whip more in the Quest than I do the Vive. And I think part of that is just the the aesthetic of it fits really well, but the controller actually feels like a lot more just right for the game.
Yeah.
Got that like angle of like a pistol down, so it just like it feels right.
Controller feels a little bit more like a gun.
Yeah. You don't have this just like remote.
Yeah.
Let me just swing around a wand.
Right.
It's a magic wand. Yeah, though I will say I really love the way the Quest controllers like fit to your hand. There's a right, there's a left. You've got those nice feeling grips. But despite that, I still get the hands wrong. Like every single time I try to grab the controller, I get them backwards and then I grip them and I'm like, wait, this does not feel right. And I have to like try a couple times before I figure out where my hands are supposed to go. It's weirdly tough to figure out. I once had a kid hold it upside down and had no idea he was holding it wrong. So.
Oh yeah, all the time.
But that's just people, right? And kids.
Yeah, they're a little quirky for as far as controllers go.
All right.
It's just like controllers, and it's just like that is something that just as a whole where the industry is getting towards kind of that like perfect balance. Like I feel like the Knuckles, which we don't, again, the Knuckles, that's a whole other like 5-hour conversation, but it's like I think that we're kind of going in that direction of like figuring out what people are like really kind of wanting with like controllers, but like it's a work in progress.
It's tricky because you get a focus group together and you try a bunch of controller designs, but those random people are just going to think something totally different from you or me. So it's just a matter of putting a bunch of controllers on the market and seeing which weirdly shaped, bizarrely buttoned controller happens to feel right for people. Until we all get gloves, but that is also a totally separate conversation for another week. But maybe we should move on and talk a little bit about the newest of the 3 headsets that we're looking at today, the one on James's that side.
That side right there.
You gotta Vanna White it, James.
My fingers are disappearing as I'm pointing at all of them.
Yeah, it is a little tricky.
Yes.
The Index.
So I was gonna say
Valve Index.
Yeah, I have not spent much time with the Index just because of we already have the Vives all set up already, but I think Meg, I think you've spent some time with it though, haven't you?
Yeah, the resolution is, pretty comparable to the Vive Pro. But we all kind of know the biggest perk is the knuckle controllers.
Yeah.
The earphones are a little bit different, whereas on the Vive, they kind of like fully clip down on your ears.
Yeah, total noise canceling.
Yeah. And then on the Index, they kind of just like hover over your ears, which at first I was like, what? This is really weird. And they have that like metal covering over them.
Yeah.
But I do really like it because, I didn't really notice too many problems with like noise cancellation, missing that or that being an issue. And it feels almost more like a surround sound kind of feeling.
Yeah, I actually liked still hearing a little bit of the surrounding world. Like the Vive Pro never fully cuts it out, but with the Index, it's like I can still hear when someone tells me, hey, you're about to run into a wall, or hey, get back to work, stop playing Beat Saber on the Index. And I can hear that at the same time as I can still hear the music and I don't have to pop up the ear and say, hey, what was that? Though I have to admit, for me, the one thing about the Index that I liked the most physically on the headset was just the dial for changing the pupil distance between the eyes. On the Vive Pro, you'll spin it and you'll be like, is it doing anything? Oh, there it's doing something. Wait, now it's not doing something. It's really titchy. But on the Index, it was like a really smoothly moving dial that felt like it did stuff. Like all the dials and adjustments on the Index felt like they were really precise and like I could get it exactly where I wanted it a little bit easier than other headsets. Especially compared to the Quest.
And at the lab on the Vives, we have that like leather, VR cover over the fronts, whereas the Index has that almost like athletic, like polyester kind of thing on the front. It's super comfy. It almost feels lighter to me.
Yeah.
And aesthetically, it just looks good.
Yeah, that form factor
looks
is
like
great.
the future.
Yeah.
It does.
And that's important, right? VR's got to look like the future. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay, though I have to admit, my favorite thing about the Valve Index that I feel like I have to bring up is the story behind its creation. Is it okay if I tell it?
Yeah.
I love this. So originally, the Vive Pro was made by HTC, and when they made it, they teamed up with Valve the game company that owns Steam, has produced a bunch of games you might have heard of, the Half-Life series, Team Fortress, all this other stuff. So they teamed up with them. Valve wrote the software, the Steam VR software that ran the Vive Pro. And the whole idea of the partnership was that HTC would make the hardware, and then Valve would create the software that would support it, and people would buy their games through Steam. And that was how it was going to work. And then, out of the blue, a couple years into the Vive cycle, HTC comes out with Viveport, a like headset software / game store, totally separate from Steam, that they want everybody to subscribe to and buy games on. Just like totally cutting Valve out of it, out of nowhere. And Valve is just like, okay, sure, thanks. We're gonna make our own headset now, and it's gonna be cooler than yours, and it's gonna be cheaper, and F you. And so they did. And the Index isn't really like especially better than the Vive in any one thing, but they just took all the same specs and they put it into like a cool modern looking form factor and made it like $200 cheaper, made it come with cool controllers, and then just released it as a huge middle finger to Vive over the whole HTC Viveport debacle thing. And I just absolutely love that. Just like the dumb cutthroat politics of VR.
Right. And you can still, I mean, use, you know, basically the same exact setup that you already have with the Vive. You can still use the same lighthouses with the Index.
Nice,
so,
yeah.
I mean, the switching between the two is easy.
Yeah, I remember when we first got it and we literally just plugged the Index into the computer without adjusting the lighthouses, and it was a super easy upgrade, which was definitely on purpose on Valve's part, right? Like, here, you don't buy the peripherals, just buy the headset and you can throw HTC stuff out the window.
Right. But yeah, Jared, have you been playing Half-Life with the Knuckles when you go in?
Yeah. And like actually, James and I were chatting for a bit before both of you got on, but yeah, just like with the Knuckles, and actually Guerre kind of touched on it earlier, but just like with them having the joysticks and also of course like the like tactile haptic grips on it. It feels so much more natural, just also from like actually reaching down and grabbing something. Or with Half-Life Alyx, you have these like gravity gloves, so you can like pretty much use the force and just like grab things out of the air. But then also with the joysticks, it's just like if you've played any video games ever in your life and you've used a joystick, they just feel so much more natural, just because it's like that's how we're used to like gaming. So it's just like, and then also, which again, this is probably a different conversation, but just like, I spent quite a bit of time in Boneworks before I got into Half-Life Alyx, which is just like kind of somewhat similar mechanics, like very different mechanics, but there's some overlap as well. So it just, it allows like those kind of knuckle controllers. It just opens up a whole different world of physics and just like sense making and interacting with the virtual world.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I think the best way for the Knuckles, I like to describe them, it's like an all-purpose controller, because like grabbing it feels like you're supposed to just be grabbing like a normal stick, so people can get used to that motion very easily. But then there's also just the thumb part with the joysticks and like singular button presses that people who have used controllers and stuff before in the past. So it's like, it fits how people hold things very like flexibly and like naturally. I guess that, yes. Thanks.
Well, and it's like in Trover Saves the Universe, it's like you are, oh shoot, I forget what your character is just sitting in a chair because you're I forget the who exactly you are, but like you just have a controller. So it's like you're just like playing a video game within the game, but the Knuckles are like super intuitive with that. And just like then it's just like VR, but just like an actual just video game. So
yeah,
it's super weird. I love it.
It's a very strange game.
Okay. Before we wrap up, I do have a question. The all-important question. All of your VR headsets are taken away. You get one of the 3 headsets that we have talked about today to use until the next generation of VR comes out, and you are stuck with that headset. Which headset do you pick?
Controllers included.
Controllers included.
Obvious.
You're stuck with the controllers that came with it. No mixing and matching.
Index, dude.
Yeah.
The Knuckles are sweet.
I'm going with the Index as well. Actually.
Okay. So advantages and disadvantages aside, we're all Index fanboys is what we're saying.
True. True.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do think there's pros and cons for all of them. But
Mhm.
yeah, look at the index; it's just so shiny.
Right.
It's like- and of course, it's like we support like all the developments. It's just like it's all different
Mhm.
facets of the same field, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would go with the Indexo personally.
And
Totally.
there's definitely not any bias here. It's not like we're all huge nerds or anything.
I'm not a nerd.
No.
No, absolutely not. Of course
No.
not. I believe you. All right.
All right, yeah. So awesome. This is also the stuff we just talk about for hours anyway. But
Right.
yeah, thank you all for sitting down and chatting about VR headsets with me.
Yeah, no problem. I'll see you
Yeah.
next week.
Main
Next week.
takeaways. They're all different, and we stick with the Index. So
They're all good in some way.
all right.
All right.
Till next time.
All right. Bye-bye.
Logging
Peace.
off.
Bye.